With all that said, we're glad you're here this morning. Today we are in the second week of our series, The Easy Commandments, and today we're going to talk about finances, we're going to talk about money. And to just start off after all that, I want to talk about something that happened that should be in recent memory for all of us. I want to talk about what's being referred to now as the Great Recession of 2008 through 2010. When we were going through this, and at kind of this time in our history, if you watch the news, and I imagine most of us did because we kind of always wanted to know what was happening next, or if you read any articles on it, normally most of the press went to the issues of Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac, and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, there we go, sorry, got them backwards, and government bailouts, and the auto industry, and home foreclosures, and that's kind of what the constant conversation was, as to what's going to happen with all these different things, what's going on with this. And the thing is that there was another headline, there was another storyline that was kind of running underneath the surface that we heard a little bit about, but it really was kind of an afterthought compared to everything else. And if I could just give you a few stats to let you know this. Over a three-year period between 2008 and 2010 in Britain, they attributed over 1,000 suicides to the economic crisis. Now, normally we talked about government bailouts and what had these corporations done that had got us to this point. And that was kind of a side note, like, oh yeah, and by the way, there were over 1,000 suicide increase that can be directly attributed to the economic crisis. And in Britain, they found that as unemployment rose, for every 10% that unemployment rose, the suicide rate went up 1.5%. And there's a few stories of this, to be more specific, if I give you some of them. One of them is a guy by the name of Antonio Tamioso, who's 53 years old. He ran a construction company, and there were a few different times that people didn't call in that he were indebted to him, and he was looking for payments of. And then whenever he actually got to a point in time where he was afraid he was going to have to close his company because these people who he had done jobs for kept piling up more and more, and they hadn't paid, when he actually called them to bring in the money, basically the universal response, he called about 10 different people, was, we can't pay, and I don't think we're ever going to pay. And so his response was he went out to his warehouse and hung himself. Another story that's a little closer to us is there was a 93-year-old widow in Ohio who had been living in her house for 38 years, and when authorities showed up to evict her from her home, she shot and killed herself. And the one that just kind of stung me the most as I was reading through and just gathering different things on this is there was a mom, and she had been getting all these papers that eviction was coming in their near future. They were going to be evicted from their home. And she didn't want her husband to know about this. She didn't want her husband to stress out. So she kept hiding all the information from him. And she always checked the mail. She'd shred the mail so he could never see this. And when she realized that she got to the point that she could no longer hide this from him, she left on her kitchen table, she left her funeral plans, she left her life insurance policy, and she left a note saying that she was going to kill herself so her husband and their kids could stay in the house. And then she went and shot herself. And her husband's response when they interviewed him on the news was, we could have found a different house. Which is like obvious. Of course, we think, of course they could have found a different house. But the interesting thing, the thing that was very, very intriguing to me, is that when the media reported, and again, this should have gotten way more press. This should have gotten way more headlines than they actually did. But when the media reported on the Great Recession, and they would mention the suicides, and they would mention the amount of people who were killing themselves because of their difficult economic situation, they referred to it as a natural byproduct, as a natural consequence of our difficult economic times. And so it'd be like, yeah, the country's in a great recession, and so companies are struggling, people are being evicted, companies need bailed out, and people are killing themselves. And I went through this and I was like, wait a second. Like, death is a byproduct of war. Like, that's an inevitable byproduct. We should understand that. If you go to war, people will die. Death is a byproduct of hard economic times. We should not connect those two nearly so easily. I mean, we should go, wait, there's something wrong there. And what it revealed to us in that moment was it was what I call a difference between sorrow and despair. You see, sorrow is something that when something is taken from you and you experience sorrow, sorrow is like an extreme sadness, but it's a sadness that you recover from. It's a sadness for which people can console you. And the issue is that you're sorrowful over things that matter to you. Despair is what happens when something that is of ultimate importance is taken from you. And you experience despair. Despair is inconsolable because what happens is that the thing that gave you hope, the thing that gave you purpose or meaning has been removed. And so in your mind, the only logical decision is to end your life. Because if my life was built on this and I can no longer have this, then why would I keep living? If my life was built on having my own company and my company is going to shut down, then my only response is to kill myself. Or if my life had been so drawn up in my house, in my home, and I'm going to be evicted from that, then the only logical conclusion I would make is to kill myself so my family could live in my home. And I can see your faces. We're kind of sitting down there, and we go through this, and we go, that's crazy. That doesn't make sense. Yet this was the natural flow of thought for people. And what it revealed to us, this is the thing that we didn't talk about. What it revealed to us is that so many people had put their hope in money. So many people have put their ultimate hope and trust in their wealth and in their finances. And when that was taken from them, that's why we see people on the New York financial district throwing themselves out of buildings, killing themselves, because the thing that made their life matter had been taken from them, and they would never get it back, and they had nothing to turn to. And that's what we're talking about through this series. We're in this series called The Easy Commandment, and we're going through what are the key different idols in our lives. How do we identify them? How do we respond to them? And today we're going to talk about money. Now, money is a very, very difficult one to talk about in terms of the fact that we don't ever really think that our idolatry, that our thing that we put our hope in, is actually money. And that's for a couple different reasons. One of the easiest ones is the fact that we think that for money to be our idol, it means we have to have a lot of money. And nothing could be further from the truth. On the one end, we live in the top 2 to 3% of the entire world. Like, if you're here, you live in the top 2 to 3% of the entire world. But we have a tendency to always compare ourselves to our 1% or our $10,000 income range as a family. And those are the people who are at the top of our bracket are the people who money must be the idol for them. It can't be me. And for Jesus, if money was your idol, it's not about having a lot of it. It's about excessive anxiety about your money. If money is your worry, if money is your trouble, if money is your problem, that's where money really comes in. But I think the reason why we struggle even more admitting to the idolatry of money is because money sits kind of underneath, what's really driving it sits underneath the surface. And if I could just say this, anytime as a church that we talk about money, we're not really talking about money. We're talking about something else that is going on underneath that. And so today, when we're talking about the idolatry of money, what we're really talking about is greed. Now, I don't know about you, but I have never in my entire life heard someone admit that they were greedy. I've never had somebody go, well, I'm just a greedy person. That's me. Like, we don't say that. We'll say we're prideful. We'll say we're liars. We'll say we're cheaters. That's like, I can say that. If I don't cheat in many things, but I will cheat in the game of Uno. So if you ever play me in Uno, just be prepared, because I will sit down like 8 cards at once, like 4 of blue, and all of a sudden half my pile's gone. Like, I cheat, I'll throw cards away, I'll hide them in my pockets. It's just kind of understood. If I play Uno with you, if you cheat in Uno, we'll have a great game. I'll still win because I'm a better cheater than you at Uno. But it's kind of like we go through these different things, and we'll admit to that stuff. We'll admit, oh, I'm prideful, oh, I lie. And it's like, why are you so upset because you lost the game? I'm just not a good loser. I'm sorry, that's just, and like that's a character fault. But people will so readily admit to that. I'm just not a good loser. I'm just too prideful about winning. But then we get to greed, and I've never once in my entire life heard somebody go, well, I'm just a greedy person. Well, why are you in such debt? I'm just greedy. That's it. No, we say, people keep having sales. It's their fault. If they would quit having sales, then I wouldn't be in so much debt because I wouldn't feel the need to buy. But we never just kind of stop and say, well, I'm greedy. And I think the reason why is because greed manifests itself as one of two things. Greed comes to the surface as a focus either on status or security. We're either so focused, that is how greed kind of makes its way out into our lives, is either status or security. I want to talk about the status side first. We get so focused, and it's an age-old thing we've talked about a lot, of keeping up with the Joneses, but it's really true. I mean, we buy stuff because other people have stuff, and we want to be like them, or we want to not be viewed as bad as them. And so we kind of keep running through things to get to that certain status level. I love this. I want to give this to you. In Ecclesiastes 5:10, he says, "Whoever loves money never has money enough." Whoever loves money never has money enough. I think that was the precursor to more money, more problems, but I can't directly link the two, but I think that's somehow related between them. But he says, whoever loves money never has money enough. And so if you're looking to money as your status, it will never quite get you there. The other side of it, I see, is greed manifests itself as security. Greed, money, is what we put our hope, our faith in. I'm not saying this necessarily applies entirely, but let me go down this path for a second. Has anyone ever seen the show Doomsday Preppers? Like, that is an awesome show. And if you've never seen it, how it always starts out is they've got these people who are preparing for the end of the world, and it's usually some backwoods guy who's wearing like camo pants and suspenders and nothing else, and he's always got a shotgun, and my name's Bo, and I'm preparing something the end of the world. And then it takes you through these people, and it's kind of like all the things that they're doing to make sure if the world ends or if like zombies attack or something like that, that they'll be sufficiently prepared, that they'll be okay. And I want to mention that because we've got our tendency when we talk about money as security to think that we're talking about them. Now, to be clear, we could be talking about those people, but I'm not going to say if you're just preparing for the end of the world that necessarily that money is your security. The issue is what you put your hope in, what you put your focus on. What do you think will sustain you? Because if you think your preparations for the end of the world is going to be what matters, then money is your idol. In the same way, if you think your 401k or your retirement plan or any sorts of other things is what is going to give you security in the future, then money is your idol. Now, I want to take a brief poll here. And here's the thing, we all have to vote, okay? So this is how this is going to work. And this is just out of my utter curiosity, I want to know. And so I'll even phrase this, this is a hypothetical question. If money was your idol, okay? For other people, we understand no one here, money's not your idol. But if it happened to be your idol, not like the rest of the world, but if money was your idol, would your focus be more on status or security? If your problem was greed, would it be because you were focused on the status side or the security side? Okay, so we're all going to vote, okay? Because this is what you've seen, not revealing anything here. But I just really want to know kind of where people fall. And so if money was your idol, how many would you say it'd be because of status? Raise your hands real high, keep them up. Okay. How many of you would say security? Okay, that's really interesting. I got nothing more than that. I just really wanted to know that. So thank you. I appreciate that. Now, really, I promise there was nothing more to that. And so that's where we get it. Kind of everything drives to that point. Money's not really the issue. Greed's the issue. It manifests itself as status or security, which we understand how we easily fall into. Now, what we're talking about in this series is the fact is that you can't simply remove an idol. You can't simply take something that's on the top shelf and take it down. You have to put something else in its place. Otherwise, another idol will quickly replace it. And so you have to take something that will lead you to Christ and strategically put it in its place. And the Bible is very clear as to what you should replace greed with. It says it over and over again. And so I want to look at a quick passage in the Old Testament that says it, and then I want to get into it a little bit as to why it says that. And so this is what it says. This is Leviticus 23, verse 22. It says, when you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and the alien, like foreigner, not alien, bug-eyed. The poor and the alien, I am the Lord your God. And so he says this, when you have a field, do not harvest the whole field. Strategically, purposefully, leave some left over for those who don't have much. He's saying be generous. If you don't want to be greedy, be generous. And it's really interesting to me because if you don't read this because Leviticus is boring, okay? So don't read Leviticus. But when he says it, it's in the midst of a long line of instructions as to celebrations and how to properly celebrate. And it's in the midst of his instructions on celebrations that he tells us to remember those who don't have much. This is very important. Because the thing is that, like, have you ever noticed that we care about the poor, we care about those who are struggling, as soon as that lower middle class makes its way below the poverty line? Like, that's when people get upset. When employment reaches double digits, everybody freaks out. And it's like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? We've got to do all these things for all these people. What about when, like, that group just stays in the unemployment line? And if I could give this a second, you may have different perspectives, philosophies as to why that is the case. I think as a church we can all agree that we should care about those who are struggling. And I mean, we could at least have that as a baseline, that we all care about that for those who are struggling, for those who are in need, we care for them, that we want to help those people. And he says this in a time of celebration, that this is what you should do, that you should remember them. Now, for some of you who are farmers, you can go, oh, I don't really have many aliens wandering through my fields, but the application seems a little more direct. For me, I kind of go, so does that mean I don't have to mow my whole yard? Can I just leave the outer perimeter and say, honey, I'm sorry, that's for the poor and the alien? I'm like, what? And it's like we look at other, like, when we make a casserole, and by we make a casserole, I mean my wife makes a casserole because you don't want to eat a casserole that I made. Do I leave the crusty part on the outside and just eat the middle and then set it outside? And you're welcome. Like, no. But the point that he makes here is you purposefully do not consume everything that comes your way. You deliberately decide ahead of time to leave some left over for those who are struggling. And we've talked about this before as a church. This is important. That the response to greed, the antidote to greed, is generosity. If your stuff, if your things have a grip on your life, the way that you break the power of that grip is you give your stuff away. And we go, well, I don't want to do that. I know, it's because you're greedy. I mean, it's really obvious. But the way that you break the power of greed, it's real simple. You just give that stuff away. And it no longer has power. It no longer has control over you. And it says this throughout the Bible over and over again. It says, the way you fight greed is to be generous. The way that you get rid of greed is to be generous. Now, this is what I want to do now. That's the application. That's the, okay, here's what's going on in your heart. Here's why your heart is greedy. And then this is what you do to break that down. I want to talk about why we should respond that way. Because there's something else going on in our heart that I want to get at, and it's more than simply, okay, I'm generous to not be greedy. And to do that, I want to look at the story of Zacchaeus, a story I think we're all pretty familiar with. If you have your Bible, open it up to Luke chapter 19. Luke chapter 19, whether it's in paper or on your phone. And we're going to look at the story of Zacchaeus. And I think there's this tendency, and it's kind of funny, and it's why I love what we do back in Kid XP, is it's interesting what stories we make out to be Bible stories for kids. And so, like, Zacchaeus is a very, very strong Bible story for kids. Most kids know the story of Zacchaeus because Zacchaeus climbed a tree. And I don't know who it was years ago and went, okay, this is a kid's Bible story. Why is this a kid's Bible story? Because he climbed a tree and kids climb trees. So this must be a Bible story for kids. And we're all pretty familiar with it. But there's more that's going on here than simply, if I could say it like this, climbing midgets and their dinner companions. I mean, there's more that's going on in the story than simply that. Out of curiosity, this is going to be you're going to have to really trust me on this and really not be embarrassed. Do we know the song? Like, do we? Yeah, some of us. Could you nod your head if you know the song? Could we sing the song? Casey, you're looking excited. Could you belt it out? And we'll all join in with you, except me, but we'll all join in with you. That made me so happy. Okay, so good. So we know the story. I want to look at what's actually happening in the story, because we know those facts, but there is, and this is where I struggle, is because sometimes we make it a kid's story. Zacchaeus is a story for us. I mean, we should learn more about Zacchaeus than simply climb a tree to see Jesus. So let's all go out and climb trees. That's the application. No. So this is Luke 19, starting in verse 1. And it says this: Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. That phrase, chief tax collector, is very important. How it worked is the Romans had occupied the Jewish people amongst other people, and they would not set up their own people to collect taxes so they could go back and expand their kingdom and feed all the emperors and everything like that. What they did is they took volunteers from the citizens of that community to serve as tax collectors. And so their volunteers would then go and they would tax their own people. Now they had to give a certain percentage to the Roman government, but they could basically name their price. And anything extra that they took in, they got to keep. And so if you came to a tax collector, they could pick any number they wanted. This is your tax. And then they would have to send a percentage back, and they would get to keep the rest. So you can imagine I could say it like this, you can imagine the hatred here for someone who is living in their own community, who is getting rich off of their brothers and sisters and co-workers, well, not co-workers, brothers and sisters and neighbors. Someone who's getting rich off of their own people. I think the closest parallel that we have in recent history is the Jewish people who would corroborate with the Nazi officials to find other Jews who were hiding in Germany during World War II. I mean, we look at those people and we go, how could they do that to their own people? And the answer is, well, they got rich off of it. And so it says here, it says that Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. He was not just like some bottom level guy. He was way up on the totem pole. He was a chief tax collector. And so we would go, well, why would he do that? Because he was greedy. Well, it says he was wealthy. If he was hated by his people, why wouldn't he stop? And you know that answer. Because greed never knows an idea of enough. And so the fact that he was wealthy wasn't enough. He needed more. And so that's why he's continuing this job. So he's a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Verse 3. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. And we've talked about this before, but this is important. In their culture, very much in our culture, when you invited someone into your house, like this was intimate. This was a strong sign of friendship. I mean, we did that. Like, you invite someone to Applebee's, that means we're kind of friends. You invite someone to McDonald's, that means, yeah, whatever. I don't want to spend that much money on hanging out with you and leave whenever I can because you get the food up front. Don't want to wait for the check. You invite someone to your house, that's like, ooh, and then I've got to have him back because otherwise that's awkward and we've got to do all this and that thing. But he says, I'm going to stay at your house. Look at the responses. Verse 6, it says, so he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Now, Just stay with me on this, because I'm going to kind of go down a rabbit trail here that has nothing to do with the message. But since we're hearing the story, I want to make this important point. They say he has gone to stay at the house of a sinner. How do they define a sinner? It's the same way that we define a sinner. Not how God defines a sinner. The way that they define a sinner, the way that we define a sinner, is someone who struggles with something that we don't. Someone who is struggling with an issue that we don't struggle with. Those are the sinners. Those are the people who are bad. And it's important that we recognize that, because I feel like anytime we read a story, anytime we go through a story, we automatically identify with one of the characters. And that's a good thing. We put ourselves in one of the character's shoes. Like, you go through the story of David and Goliath. I don't know how many of you have ever heard the story of David and Goliath and went, I'm Goliath. I'm the big bully who's trying to kill the little shepherd boy, and I'm going to be taken down with a sling and a stone. Like, no one ever thinks they're Goliath. Or in the same sense, no one thinks they're Saul discouraging David from going and fighting Goliath. But how many of us, if we look at it like that, we go, oh my goodness, I am Saul. I'm the person, no, that won't work. That won't work. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. You're not prepared. You're not ready. And so we read these stories, and we automatically put ourselves in the position of the most likable character when we usually aren't. And so I just want to pause right here and say that as, please make sure that in this story, in your story, that you're Zacchaeus, that you're the guy who's self-aware, and you're not the person who's calling him a sinner. That you're not the person who's standing on the outside. As we go over these next couple weeks of the idols in our lives, make sure you're not the person who's sitting back going, well, they really struggle with this. Well, they have an issue with this. Like next week, we're going to look at the idols of politics, power, and success. And it's really easy when we talk about politics to assume anyone who is even nominally involved in the political process, that that's their idol. When it could be even more so your idol, because you're completely removing yourself from the situation. And so I'm just saying this, please be aware, because their struggle in their day is the same thing that we struggle with, because we're all people. They say he's a sinner because they didn't struggle with the issue. Okay, end of first rabbit trail. Moving on. Verse 8. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. We're going to come back to this. I want to go on, and then we'll come back to verse 8. Verse 9. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. And so let's see this clearly, what's going on here. Verse 8, Jesus says, I will give half of my possessions, not salary, not income. I will give half of what I own to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone, which he has, not in Uno, in real life, if I've cheated anyone, I will pay back 4 times the amount. That's verse 8. Verse 9, Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house. And this is what we do. We try to put a verse in between. And we'll go this. Like, we want the verse to say, and then Zacchaeus bent down on one knee, prayed the sinner's prayer, raised his hand in church the next Sunday, threw his stick in the fire, or for others of us, we'll do it something like this. And then Zacchaeus gave away half his possessions and promised to pay back 4 times the amount. And so Jesus took him out by the river, baptized him. They came back to his house, and Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house. Right? See, we think that it's this nice, neat process, these simple steps that you have to go through. And I don't want to say that too, when I say those things, I don't want to say them disrespectfully, because I have some doctrinal beliefs that I hold very near and dear, and those may be some of yours. But the issue that I want to point at is we think salvation, we think following Christ is a nice, simple, neat process, and you have to do this and this and this. But what happens here is Jesus comes on the scene. Zacchaeus responds, and Jesus declares what has already happened. He doesn't take him through a sinner's prayer or anything like this, or you have to ask, believe, and confess. A, B, C. Now you can remember that, Zacchaeus, when you go off with all your sinner tax collector friends. Like, none of that happens. Zacchaeus responds to Jesus. And Jesus declares, today salvation has come to this house. Now, I want to look at verse 10, and then we'll come back to 8. Verse 10, Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son of Abraham. And then verse 10, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. The Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. This is the second rabbit trail of the message. And then we'll come back and we'll pull it all together. The reason why people were shocked that Jesus went to eat at the house of a sinner is because they did not know why Jesus was there. See, it was surprising to them that he would go to the chief tax collector's house. And Jesus declares at the end, salvation has come to this house. I came in, I went to you because I am here to seek and to save what was lost. This is incredibly significant. I think sometimes when we pray, like real fervent, if I could even say it, violent prayers, like things that we're desperate for, and then God doesn't respond how we expect him to, we assume God doesn't know something that we know. And the opposite is true. If you knew what God knew, and you knew God's purposes, then you would respond in the same way. You wouldn't give yourself the new car either, or whatever it is that you're praying for. You would respond in the exact same way if you knew what God knew, and if you were acting according to his purposes. And we get so hung up on this. And the reason why I want to take so much time on this right here is because this is very important for how you understand what we do as a church. Now, we don't always do this right. We don't always get this right. But every Sunday, at least twice, you will hear us say the mission of the church, to lead people to be passionate followers of Christ. We will say it so many times that you will probably get sick of it. And that's okay. I understand that. But the issue is that you can't understand anything that we do, why we do anything that we do, if you don't know why we're doing it. And it's the same thing that he says right here. To seek and to save what was lost. And so you may ask, okay, why do we do this way? Why do we play this type of music? Why do we not do these things? Why do we not have VBS? Why do we not do all these other sorts of things? And the answer is, our filter that we're basing everything on is to seek and to save what was lost. This is incredibly important because Jesus going to Zacchaeus' house does not make sense if you don't know why he's there. And what we do as a church does not make sense if you don't know why we're here. Okay, so there we go. End of second rabbit trail. But I want to go back to verse 8. You with me? Yeah, thanks. The 5 of you. We'll get a small group, and we'll go. All right, verse 8. It says, But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Very generous, right? Could we nod our heads in agreement? Very generous. There is no discussion in here. Jesus never goes, well, Zacchaeus, I've been watching you, and you're a pretty greedy person. And if you want to break the power of greed in your heart, then you need to respond with generosity. The thing that you've got a firm grip on, you need to give it away if you want to break that power. So be generous so you're not greedy. No, that's not what happens. Jesus comes into his house, and Zacchaeus' natural response is generosity. And this is incredibly important because generosity is not our response to greed. Generosity is our response to Jesus. And those are 2 very, very different things. If you're looking to be a generous person because you don't want to be greedy, you're eventually going to wear out. You're going to get tired of giving. But if you're looking to respond to Jesus and what he's done, then generosity is a natural result. It's a natural byproduct. If I could frame it like this, you have a debt that you could not pay. Not a financial debt, even though it's very, very similar. You have sinned. Not just sins that other people do that you don't struggle with. You have sinned. You have fallen short of God's standard. And the issue is that that's something that you could not pay. You could not get back in the black. You were in the red forever, and you were going to be stuck there. And so you needed someone to pay that debt for yourself to get back in God's good graces, is the way it's usually phrased. To get back in his good graces. And so what happened was Jesus paid that debt for you. Nothing that you could do. And the reason why he paid that debt for you, this is very important. The reason why he paid that debt for you is not so that you would wake up 30 minutes early and read your Bible. He didn't pay that debt for you so you would have good church attendance or so that you would give 10% of your income. The reason why he paid that debt for you is because he wanted a relationship with you. We call that his grace. He gave you something that you did not deserve. He gave you something that you had no basis on your own to make up for it. There's no way you could pay for it. There's no way you could earn it. It's his grace. And when you come face to face with his grace, your natural response is to be generous. Your natural response is to want to show grace to others. And this is significant because if you are trying to be generous so that you're not greedy, you'll get tired of being generous. And eventually you'll sit around and you'll go, well, why should I give that up? Why should I help them? Why should I do this? Because a negative motivator will only take you so far. This is something that we're learning right now as parents. We have great trouble getting our 2.5-year-old to do certain things. So for those of you who have 2.5-year-olds, we could just gather together and have a support group and really struggle through that. Because we say, change your shoes. Now. No. It's like, get out of the pool. Now. Eat your dinner. Now. And it's like, I can't logic. I can't reason with her. There's no understanding there. And so really, right now, all I've got is spankings. Like, I've tried suckers. I've tried Netflix. Tried to lure her away to these things. Huh, you want a lollipop? Huh? Come eat your food. I'll put the lollipop in the middle of the food, and maybe no, it doesn't work. And so right now, you'll get a spanking. Okay, I'll do that. But I know that'll only take me so far. Eventually, she's going to get calluses or whatever she has to do, and she'll end up being okay. And it's very much the same thing with greed and generosity. If you're trying to avoid greed, it will only take you so far. It'll be a quick fix, but it's only going to take you so far. If you really want to become a generous person, you don't focus on not being greedy. You focus on what Christ has done for you. Because you had a great debt, and our God is very, very generous. And then this is the great thing that happens. When you are generous, you get to be a part of extending grace to other people. And I imagine you've been there. When you did something for someone that they didn't deserve, that they didn't expect, and you see it on their face afterwards, it's awesome. I mean, there is almost no better feeling in the entire world than when you extend grace to someone else and they respond to that. And that's what our response is here. We're not responding. We're not generous to break the power of greed, even though generosity does replace greed. We're generous because of what Christ has done for us. Now, here's my guess. And I want to get kind of into we're going to take a shift. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty here for a little bit. This is what you by and large, I'm not saying that no one here struggles with greed. We may not any of us admit to it, but my guess is some of us here struggle with greed. But by and large, you are a very generous people. You are very generous people. But part of the issue is you have to position yourself to be generous. If you're always worried as to if you can pay the bills, generosity very, very quickly goes out the window. Now, you may have a generous heart, but if there is never any money left over, if you're always wondering, are we going to get evicted from our home, it's very, very difficult to be generous. That's what that Leviticus passage talked about. You have to strategically position yourself to be generous. And so this is what for the next 10 minutes, I just want to get real practical here. We've kind of got out of the focus of the message now. But I want to talk about, okay, this is how you position yourself to be generous. I'll give you step one, and I'll take you through this, and then I'll make it really, really simple, okay, so we can hang through this. Step one, if you're looking to be a generous person, is you actually get something for yourself. Isn't that great? Huh? You're excited about that. You want to be generous? I say get something for yourself. You go to Amazon.com, okay? Right? Amazon.com, or you go to Barnes & Noble, or maybe even Walmart, and you buy Dave Ramsey's book, The Total Money Makeover. Okay? We got that? This is why I say that. A lot of people, this is awesome. I didn't realize this was here first service, and it made me happy that it was right here. A lot of people go with this book. This is a great book. This is Dave Ramsey's book, Financial Peace University. Total Money Makeover has all the information that Financial Peace University has, except it lays it out as a process. Okay, so they're the exact same information, but it kind of goes through, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4. And it goes through it, so it makes it even easier. I want to take you real quickly through what the 7 steps are. So when you actually go through it, or if you're, okay, some of you may be like me, where I'm really, really cheap. Like I'm crazy cheap. Like, and I don't say it in a good way. Me and Bethany's first date, when I was 18 years old, is we went to Applebee's because I had a gift card, and then we went to the movies because I had a gift card. And I was so smooth, I was so aware that it's not like I should hide the gift card and slip it in. I was like, I got a gift card. I'm not paying anything for this. This whole night's free. Isn't that awesome? So since I've changed my ways, I understand a little better now. But there'll be some of you that you go, oh, I'm not going to spend money. We're so in the debt. We're so in the hole. We're so struggling. There's no way I could spend money to do that. I just want to take you real quickly through what his 7 steps are. For some of us, this is going to be quick over our head, but I'll bring it back together and I'll make it real simple at the end. His step 1 that he has in here is first thing you do is you save $1,000 to start an emergency fund. And I like his line as he says, we're familiar with Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. When you have an emergency fund, it's much more of a tendency for those things that can go wrong to stay away, or for you to be prepared for it if you have somehow to respond. Your dishwasher breaks, your oven goes out, all sorts of different things. So first step, save $1,000 to start an emergency fund. Step 2 is you pay off debt with the debt snowball. I don't have time to go through that and explain it. It makes a lot of sense. Basically, you pay off your highest interest debt that's the lowest amount that you can pay, and then you keep building it up over time. I know I lost you. You pay off debt. That's step 2. There we go. Step 3 on here is you save 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is in case someone loses a job, something burns down, something like that. You kind of prepare for that just in case, and that becomes your emergency fund. We actually do this as a church. We have 3 to 6 months of expenses that we have in an emergency fund, and we don't touch it unless if there is an emergency. There we go. That's huge. And so that's just very helpful. This is not money becomes your security. Jesus is still your security, but it puts you in a spot where you're not devastated. Step 4 on this is you invest 15% in retirement. The reason why I want to go through this is I want to make a few comments on this. He says 15% in retirement. I've heard people say 10 to 20% in retirement. If I could just give a side note, this is what I found. And this may not be you. You may be faithful. You may be disciplined. That's fantastic. Most of the people who I found who say put 20% in retirement don't put anything. And they'll say put 20% in retirement. Well, what do? Well, I don't have enough money to do that, so I don't do anything. And so find yourself in there. For us, where we are right now financially, we put 10% in retirement. Now, we diligently put 10% away for retirement, but that's all that we can afford right now. And so the point is there, do something. The next step he has is college funding for children. This was always interesting to me. When I was a youth pastor, I'd always get this chance when we would recognize the seniors or they'd kind of send them out. I would always ask the parents of seniors every single time. And because I knew one day I'd be a parent, I wanted to learn something from them. And so, like, when they were graduating, I'd almost always ask, okay, what would you do the same? What would you do different? Like, looking for, like, spot of reflection, spot of wisdom. What can you tell me when I'm going to have kids in the future that I can do? And almost to a T, almost every single one of them on what they would do different, they'd say, start saving for college earlier. Like, I'm looking for advice on spanking or not spanking, things like that. But every single one of them, start saving for college earlier. And so he explains in that how you make that step. Next step on there is you pay off your home early. I'm going to go through that. And then step 7 is build wealth and give. The key point that I'm just trying to show you as you go through that is to be generous. You have to position yourself to be generous. If you have a generous heart, and all your money are eaten up in expenses and debt, you will not act generously, and you will have a tendency to become greedy over time. And so you have to position yourself to be generous. Now, if that was too confusing, I want to make it as easy as I possibly can. And I need a volunteer, preferably a college kid. Tanner. Yeah, hey. Thanks. Could we give Tanner a round of applause? Come on up here, Tanner. There you go. Here you go. Stand right here. Tanner was in my youth group, and I like the fact that as soon as I looked at him, he knew what was coming. Okay, I'm coming up. All right, Tanner. Can you tell the people how many, what you have there? $10. Okay, we got that? $10. Just to be clear, we've done stuff like this before. Like, there's no Plinko board coming down or anything. Like, this is all we have. Don't expect more to happen. Okay, so we have $10. Tanner, this is, and I hope this doesn't happen for you, this is going to represent all the money that you will make in your entire life. I hope you make more than that. But for the purpose of illustration, this is going to represent all the money you entirely make. Okay, so if you have $10, the first thing that you do, because you don't want to be greedy, right? Yeah, don't want to be greedy. You want to give, okay? Because that breaks the power of greed. You respond to Christ, and you can tell everybody that message. I understand. I won't make you do that now. I know you can do it. So the first thing is you give. Do you have a guess as to how much you give if you have $10? 20%? No, even less. 10. So that would be how many dollars of your 10? 1. And where would you give? Do you have a guess? Yeah, there we go. High five. I like you. Where do we put our money at church? Do you know what we put it in? Yeah, in the box, in the Tom. Do you want to go put that $1 in Tom? Like right now? Yeah. Could we clap for him while he goes in a hurry? I'll say you're going to have to go fast because we don't clap very long. Keep clapping, keep clapping, keep clapping. Yeah, there we go. Even more excited on the way back. Fantastic. Okay, so Tanner, how many dollars do you have now? $9. And so you want to save, because one day you're gonna have to retire after you get done with the PGA Tour and everything like that. You're going to have to retire. So how much should you save? 2%? Yeah, that's good. We'll say $1. So you take that $1, and why don't you put that, which side do you keep your wallet in? Left or right? Okay, good. I do too. Oh, that's okay. You don't have to have it with you. I keep my. So why don't you put that in your left back pocket, because you don't usually go. So that's your save. And so how much money do you have now? $8. And what do you do with that? Go ahead. Go ahead. Spend it. Maybe take your lady friend out for a nice meal? McDonald's? Yeah? There you go. Okay, so there you go. $8. Go spend it. Like not right now. Go sit down now. But then you can go spend it later. Would you give Tanner a round of applause? See, come to church, you get $8 richer. Well, 9, but he can't use that till later. Now, if that was too confusing for you, and I understand that was pretty tough because we dealt with 10 whole dollars and then we broke it down. But if that is too confusing for you, we made a video of 2 people who are actually doing this, have been doing this for a number of months to show you how it works. So could we go ahead and play that video?
Hi, I'm Sarah. Hi, I'm Micah. And we're going to teach you how to spend money. If we had $10, we will say to 6, 7. We will use it for toys for fun money. I want to spend it for Hot Wheel track. For my fun money, I want to spend it for Monster High dolls and for Play-Doh, where it goes loopy-loop and then 2 loopy-loops and then a jump with a circle, and then you go on a twirlies track, and then the stop, and then. And for Tom, every Sunday we will give our money to Tom. You give one to Tom. It's fun and it's exciting because because you give money to God. Give 1. Save 1 or 2.
Spend 7. Spend 7.
And that's how you spend money.
Cha-ching.
Easy enough? I want to say this as a side note before we wrap up here today. If you're a high school or college student or something like that, and we went through this, and you go, yeah, but I don't have any money, you need to learn how to do this now. Because what's going to happen is if you don't learn how to manage your money when you don't have money, even when you make money, you will still have no money. And if I lost you in there, the end result is you just have no money ever, okay? And as a side note, parents, this is why, and this is, your kids are going to think I'm the greatest person ever, if they don't already. I understand that. But this is where you need to give your kids an allowance. And you don't give your kids an allowance and then go to Walmart and blow it all. You give your kids an allowance and you show them, okay, this goes away for later on. Yeah, this is your money, but this goes away for later. This is what you give. You need to teach them very early on. I can remember when I was younger, and I've said this before, my parents gave me 10 dimes. And I gave 1 to church, which didn't make me feel really good. Thank you, Jesus. I saved 1, and then I got to spend 9, which, let me tell you, boy, did that bring in some sweet stuff. 8 dimes at the end. Thank you very much, Mom and Dad. But the issue is you learn this early on. And for everything, for all the books that you can see on finance and stuff like that, if you would just do this, if you would give 1, save 1, or 2, save 1, and then spend the rest, you would be far ahead of most, and you would be breaking the power of greed in your heart. But we are generous, not because we don't want to be greedy. We are generous because of Christ and what he's done. Let me pray for you, and then we'll send you out. Lord, I thank you for the debt that you paid for me. I thank you for the debt that you paid for everyone in this room. I thank you for your grace, a grace that is overwhelming, a grace that is amazing. And Lord, I ask that in our lives that you would help us, you would discipline us to be generous people, that we would take the steps that were necessary in order to appropriately respond to your grace for us, and that we would be generous in all of our lives. And I pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you back here next week for part 3.